Next up, we have Stephen Esposito, who is the president and CEO of Resolve. Stephen's work covers all of Resolve's issue areas with a focus on natural resources, energy, and sustainable development. And Stephen, I wanted to let Don give that last thought on it because, you know, what's the opportunity for investors with these critical materials? And that, I think that tees up well, probably, I hope, to what you're going to be speaking to on the various opportunities that have been out there and ways maybe that haven't been explored. And with that, I turn it over to Stephen.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Appreciate being here and really appreciate the invitation from Peter. This is my first Wall Street Global Green Summit. I'm glad it's become global, as Peter was mentioning earlier. And I'll start off by saying my favorite miner and geologist used to be John Thompson, who will speak later. Over the past couple of years, it's become Don Bubar. And as I talk, I think you'll understand why. I've spent close to the amount of time Don's been working on his issues, working on responsible sourcing for metals and minerals, among other things. And then it started with helping Tiffany and Co. and then Walmart source responsible diamonds and gold into their jewelry. And then went about a decade ago, worked with Intel, HP, and Apple to address the issue of conflict minerals and responsible sourcing into their supply chain. So that's a little bit of background. Resolve's an NGO, so I'm going to give you the NGO view on where the investment opportunities are or might be. And I'll say that Resolve works in three ways. One is on government policy, and I think it's important to note that, that we're going to need some government policy reform and incentives to make this all work. We work on voluntary policy like standards, and we're about to publish a climate smart mining emissions widget that investors and downstream companies and upstream companies can use to help understand where they sit in terms of what climate reporting is going to be look like in about 5 years. And then we do a third thing, which is we incubate and stand up startups, social enterprise startups. So that's who we are. So I want to start with a proposition, which is we won't succeed in the shift to decarbonization without climate and community smart critical minerals. And we don't get these innovations without innovation in policy, technology, and the business models. And we can't support innovation without risk-willing investment and in some cases, donor community support. And to create a lane for these investments, we need a couple of things to happen. One is we need community sanction for projects, not community conflict. And we'll hear more from Alan and Zerza about those issues. And I think we need restoration and regeneration strategies alongside the mineral development. And with these two attributes added to the mining and critical minerals proposition, then I think we can, to Don's point, we can pull critical minerals, or what I might call transition minerals, out of the negative impact box that tends to frame mining and put it into the positive box. So I want to zero in on where I see opportunity for investors, whether commercial, family office, social investor, or company CSR officer. First is a grassroots investment opportunity, or a series of them. And this is really for those who would want to be part of a first mover mining and restoration story with partners like First Nations, Apple, Tiffany, and Newmont. So this is really about getting into the reputational game. We have a project where it's a startup really that's producing gold. We call it salmon gold from Alaska, the Yukon, and British Columbia. What we're doing is going back to historical tailings, to Don's point. And we're remining what's been left in the streams or near the streams where fish habitat once existed, healthy fish habitat. We remind the tailings, fix the stream, and create new habitat for these fish species. And so today, Tiffany and Apple purchase our gold and they use it in their products. And there's a second future revenue opportunity in regard to potential credits or offsets for biodiversity at our sites. So this is kind of a grassroots full value mining play, the phrase Don introduced. And it's, again, it's great for family offices, for CSR offices, and it can utilize program-related investments to pre-finance some of the restoration.
Stephen, just if you don't mind, because that actually brought up something I think might be really interesting, and you mentioned restoration, not to interrupt your flow, but I think salmon gold, I think, is just crazy and something I haven't heard of, which is fantastic. So would a project like that pay for the restoration itself?
It depends. The economics of the site, it can.
Okay.
So there are, I think, especially as we move to the more industrial size sites, the answer could be and should be in some cases yes. And we're looking, I'll talk about that in a minute. Where we're starting, it can to an extent, but we're really using this idea of restoration funding or offsets to create a second revenue stream. So that's kind of opportunity one. The second is investing in large scale commercial mining companies that are aligning their portfolios, their project portfolios to support these transition minerals. And like Don noted, I'd pay special attention to those that are utilizing full value mining strategies to help do that. And whether that's by rethinking waste at a current site or taking those same strategies and applying them to abandoned sites or brownfield sites. So look at a few things, right? How quickly are they adjusting their commodity portfolios to supply these transition minerals that we need? Are they addressing their own emissions, including for scope 3 in their operations? And are they innovating to support full value mining? I'll echo what Don mentioned about Rio Tinto as an example, right? So they're targeting tailings waste at their boron mine to produce lithium for batteries. At a site in Canada, it's scandium from titanium waste to be used for alloys and fuel cells. And at Kennecott, they'll start to pull tellurium out of the copper waste stream for use in solar panels. And this is just one company, but I think that's an interesting play and important globally for these big companies to be targeting that kind of approach. Third is the Avalons of the world. It's targeting the small, agile to mid-sized mining and materials innovators. While it might take a decade to bring, or more, to bring a new big greenfield operation online, these companies can move more quickly if they can get financed to target rare earths from coal. I think it's talk about a win-win. Don's example is perfect, right? Lithium from legacy sites with First Nations support, or tin from smaller high-grade operations. In many cases, as Don pointed out, the remining process itself is a de facto cleanup process. So look at Avalon, look at other companies like it. Resolve will help. I mean, NGOs will help. For example, we're partnering with Avalon. We're helping support, look at sustainability performance. We're adding restoration to the mix, as I mentioned. And like with Salmon Gold, we're looking to establish those downstream partners. Who wants to be the off-taker, of the lithium from that site? Those are the kind of things that we think will help lift the market and interest. So we'll recruit those downstream companies. Fourth is the opportunity to invest in the tech innovation that cuts across these categories that I just mentioned. And so those will be opportunities potentially as well. And fifth is to take a look at, socially oriented startups, not unlike Salmon Gold. And Resolve is in the process of actually developing and launching a startup enterprise to target critical minerals. So Salmon Gold's gold, obviously. This will be a similar strategy. It'll be a partner enterprise to go with an Avalon, right? So we're not competing with, but we're partnering with an Avalon. And we'd be working with a larger mining firm. So there's an opportunity there as well, especially if investors are interested in that kind of dual track, commercial, non-commercial play. A couple of things just to highlight here as I close. We'll need policy reform. I think this notion that Don pointed to of you have these legacy sites that need to be cleaned up, but you can't go get at them because of the risk. We need to figure that out with different communities, with different stakeholders. So we think this is a critically important part of the energy transition, this whole sector, this whole space. We'll be profiling the best transition minerals sites, companies, and technologies, and we're happy to share that with the investment community. We'll be building these downstream partnerships to catalyze the sector. Happy to talk further with anybody about that. And as I mentioned, we'll be looking to launch and soon launching startups in the space, social enterprise startups. And so that's kind of our play and our approach, and happy to partner with anybody who's interested in the investment community, and look forward to questions and discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, Stephen. That was really helpful, and hope you don't mind interrupting your flow a little bit. A plug for one of the groups that I work with that works with early stage climate tech companies is the Clean Tech Open. Beth Zonas, who is the executive director of the Northeast part of the program, is here in the audience, or she was, so she might ping you later for part of that, just to start with what was last first.
Sure.
And one of the things, and I hope that John Thompson, who is one of our later speakers, isn't offended that he's no longer your favorite geologist. Though kudos to Don, who I've gotten to know over the last couple of years. One of the things that I think came up in the morning sessions in one of the topics, and I think you're well positioned as an NGO who speaks to investors and looks to facilitate addressing this, no pun intended, critical area, right, is that recycling and eliminating waste was looked at not too long ago as a patriotic thing to do, and just the way we've rethought of waste in the post-war era is, not economically sound, let alone environmentally. Can you speak a little bit more to some of the incentives or things that you've seen that have really have been addressing that sustainability in some of these areas, and how it's making economic sense? I mean, I enjoyed your apparently, no pun intended, downstream revenues for salmon gold, for example, but obviously smaller things and mediating some of these traditional issues. But I think anything that you're seeing on that, or trends that or particular areas that have been really interesting to you, or you think that have been particularly promising in this broader area?
Yeah, maybe a few things, Rob. I think there's the potential eventually, and John will know better than I would, for looking at urban waste and kind of almost an urban circular economy play on metals, right? And so that's something I think to point toward the future. There's clearly, and I worked on this a number of years ago, and there's an activity in this space, others know as well, around, e-waste isn't e-waste, it's a resource. I mean, look at what Apple's committed to on circular economy, right? They've committed, they're sourcing gold from salmon gold from us, but they're also committed to using as much as they possibly can of recycled non-virgin metals in their products. So I think that's the direction of the future. Complicated, but important. And I think the other piece, two other pieces, is that the full value mining story is really the completion of the circular economy play for mining that we kind of left behind decades, or in some cases 100 years ago, when it comes to placer mining in states like Alaska. We left value in the ground, right? And so really what we're talking about, a key part of what we're talking about with full value mining is going back in and getting the critical minerals for the energy transition that were left. So, bad news, good news, it's waste, but it's a resource. To me, that's important. And then the other thing, I find when I go into communities and talk about mining projects, like if I go to northern British Columbia, where Alan's from, the first thing that communities want to talk about is, wait a second, before you do that, what are you going to do about that waste that was left, in some cases 50 years ago, right? And so from a social license point of view, if I walk in and say, my first question to you is, how can what I'm doing help address that legacy? It's a whole different conversation. Mm-hmm. It opens up space. So, for Avalon, from where I sit, like being able to go, and I've said this to large scale mining companies, to go have that question first, and then let's talk about how you want to develop a coffee project or another project in those territories. To me, that's an important door opener, and it's undervalued by the industry.
And I think, to your point, addressing some of these challenges that are legacy, they're an issue. If you're being able to extract things without putting in more extractive infrastructure or using what's already there or a smaller footprint, that's often one of the challenges, right? It's not just it's the mine, it's how much road, how much other things need to go in to accommodate that. So I think even just thinking of it holistically is something that, like you said, the mining industry may be one of the areas that hasn't thought sustainably, or whole mining is maybe new for them, given how did I know I could only get coal out of this? Why, why else would I need anything else?
I mean, the beauty of it is, if you think about where we are now, we have an economic incentive and a climate biodiversity incentive to go back to that waste. That didn't exist 20 years ago, right? Yeah. What we need to do is address the risk dimension so that we can get back in and do it cleanly and safely. I think that's where Dom's coming from. That's where we're coming from.
I think that's the challenge, right? Of the integrating that, balancing that risk, or going after those new resources, or I guess old resources, and utilizing them for the new economy. So is there anything else? Obviously, you can leave your information in the chat. We have 2 minutes left. So anything else you'd want to leave the program with? Because I'm going to not start a new question, because I think we would go well over time, unfortunately. So again, if you want to leave your information or resolves in the chat box, but anything else you want to leave the audience with before we move on to Alan?
Yeah, I'll just say a couple of quick things. One is, I will leave my information in the chat box, but we've talked a lot about this as a North American play, and it's bigger than that, right? It's a global play. I think the nice thing about North America is we have the conditions in place where we can start this, if we get cooperation across sectors, and then we can export the model. And it's a really, I think, teeing up Alan and Zerza here, First Nations, Indigenous communities as partners, as Don stated, is key, right? So that's another piece of this. So, if we can get a project underway more quickly with community buy-in, that's the win.